All right, hello and welcome into KBO Chats Live. I'm Sam Pasco alongside Erik, Halterman. And we're breaking down all 5 games on the KBO slate tonight. Follow along here on rotowire.com/freekbo. That's where we're going to be using the standings, daily lineups, all that great info and more, in addition to the cheat sheets. Check it out, rotowire.com/freekbo. Erik, we start with the standings here first. Update me, because at first glance, when we sort by rank here, I am not seeing the Dinos at the top. I'm very Dinos here. I'm instead seeing what? The KT Wiz, the Samsung Lions start to get some separation on the pack. What's going on here with the standings?
Yeah, just a 500 start for both teams that made the Korean Series last year, actually, both the Dinos and the Bears. It's not too worrisome from the Dinos. They're only 2 games out of first place. Everything's still pretty tight. Offense seems mostly fine. Aaron Altair has been excellent. Sungbum Na hasn't been quite what he's supposed to be. The pitching has been shaky. It was shaky at times last year. They've actually already had 8 different guys make at least one start. So I think once they find who the back end of that rotation is going to be, if they rotate through guys until they find a couple acceptable ones, I think they're going to be okay, because that offense is what led the team last year, and it's right up there again this season. So as long as they stop giving innings to guys who don't deserve them, which I think they'll figure out who that is sooner rather than later, I don't see any reason why they shouldn't end up near the top of the standings.
Indeed. Of course, the team right now in sole possession of first place is the LG Twins, and we will get to them in a moment. They are our final game we get to tonight. But let's dive into our first matchup. We have a lot of American pitchers, former major leaguers, taking the ball tonight, but we actually start with the matchup with 2 Korean pitchers here. We first start with the Eagles. They have lost 4 of their last 5. That one win in that 5-game kind of little shuffle here, they scored 19 runs. So over that stretch, it's a 26 runs scored, 27 runs allowed. A little unusual there, but it could be ugly tonight. Shiwon Jong, he's going to the mound, hasn't pitched more than 4 innings in any of his starts. Erik, what can you tell me about him?
Yeah, he was a guy I recommended every now and then for daily fantasy purposes last year, because he does strike guys out, or at least he did last year. Strikeout rate just over 19%, but he also walks a ton of people, over 12% last year, and that led to an ERA just over 5. But for fantasy purposes, you'd prefer a guy to at least strike people out, so you at least get some points when he's giving up a bunch of runs. This year, he's stopped striking guys out, and he's still walking everybody. His strikeout rate's down to 15.3%. His walk rate has jumped up to 13.6%. That's not really how you get it done, and it's unsurprising that he's failed to go more than 4 innings. I still think there's a fine enough back-end starter there, but even the peak version of Jung is nothing special. So would have no problem stacking hitters against him in this one.
Indeed. Looking now at the opposing pitcher, we have Lee for the Kia Tigers, who is very young. He's actually younger than me, born in 2002. Promising quality start in his last time out. Lasted 6 2/3 innings pitch, which you love to see. And speaking of strikeout numbers, 12 strikeouts against just 5 walks in his last 2 starts. Are you a fan of Lee? Are we going to believe him here, or is he still a little too young for you to fully trust?
Yeah, there might be something here with Yuli Lee. He was a regional round draft pick last year. For those who don't know what that means, there's an additional round in front of the first round in the KBO draft where teams are only allowed to select players from their region. I think that's part of the reason why Hyungwoo is always pretty bad, because they're in a small city. They don't get to pull a guy from Seoul before the start of the draft every year. Kia down in Gwangju is one of the bigger cities. So they took Yuli Lee first. So they clearly like him, and he's been pretty good already, just 3 starts. But he's striking out over 22% of opposing batters. Bit of a walk problem, 12.1% walk rate. But he hasn't given up too many runs or too many base runners. I think it's too early to say that he's definitely going to be a solid mid-rotation starter, but those early returns are about as good as you could expect from a guy in his first 3 KBO starts.
Indeed, very promising for Lee here in the Tigers. Turning our attention now to the offense of the Kia Tigers. It's the second worst in the league in terms of runs per game. Not an exciting group, really. Wonjun Choi, though, 320 batting average in his last 50 at-bats. What are we looking at with the Kia Tigers lineup?
Yeah, it's Preston Tucker and Hyungwoo Choi who drive that lineup, or at least they're supposed to, and neither of them have been what they're supposed to be. But both of them are getting a little bit better. Tucker, we know how streaky he was at times last year. Started off the year very poorly enough that his OPS is still under 600. But and he still doesn't have any homers, but he's at least starting to get hits. He's riding a 7-game hitting streak, 8 hits in his last 3. So he's starting to look more like one of the better hitters in the league, like he's supposed to be. His price is still fairly cheap on DraftKings, so he's somebody that I definitely take a look at against Jung. And I think Hyungwoo Choi is starting to pick things up a little bit too, though he's a little bit shy in the power department. But he was, I believe, the second best hitter by OPS last season, so he should be totally fine eventually. So I think once those guys turn things around, I think you'll see the Tigers offense climb up towards the middle of the pack, though I still don't think they'll be a top-tier unit at all.
We actually have a DFS-related question here from Twitch about Lee's price today. Erik just talked about him being very young, a little questionable. Is he worth a look today?
Yeah, I mean, anybody's worth a look against the Eagles. I didn't have him as one of my guys on my cheat sheet, but I definitely considered it. I don't remember his exact price, but he was bottom 3 among starting pitchers. So definitely somebody worth taking a chance on. Again, very shallow track record, but it's been about as good as you could expect, and he's got an opponent that shouldn't be too tough.
All right, let's go now to the pick here. The Tigers won 4-3 yesterday, and here we have the Tigers favored with the total set at 9.5. Where are we going to go, Erik?
Yeah, I am going to go with the Tigers. Again, liked some of what I've seen from Yuli Lee. Shiwon Jong has been pretty shaky. I'm not sure I trust Lee enough yet after just 3 starts, and I think Jong's can give up plenty of runs. So I'm willing to go over there, although not with a ton of confidence in this one. Because, again, Lee has been pretty good, and the Eagles don't have all that much on offense. So over, but not with a ton of faith there, I think.
A ton of confidence in that over 9.5. We have Joey here, a fan of that team total over 4.5 for Kia.
I would agree with that one, I think.
Erik's a fan of that one. Joey, we like that one, 4.5 for the team total. Moving on now to our next matchup. We got the NC Dinos and the Samsung Lions facing off. I'd say this is our second best matchup on the slate between 2 pitchers that are pretty interesting. Samsung in this matchup actually has a better record in their last 10 than the Dinos, something I thought I'd never say when you look at the records last year. But they do. The Lions are doing well all right this year. But they are facing Drew Rosinski and the Dinos tonight. Rosinski, I love him. He was lights out in his first 17 innings pitched this year in his first 3 starts, but he was bad in his last start. I got to admit, 8 runs on 8 hits and 3 walks. Which Rosinski are we going to get tonight, Erik?
Yeah, this is interesting because it's 2 pitchers that I do like, but they are in one of the most hitter-friendly parks in the league. I think Rosinski should be pretty good. He's almost always pretty good. I think it was only 1 run allowed in each of his first 3 starts, and his overall season numbers are still fine, even if after that poor outing last time. His whip particularly is within 1 point of where it was last year, 127 after 126 last season. Which is interesting for a guy who I believe had the exact same ERA 2 years in a row in 19 and 20. So just consistent for 3 straight years, it looks like. Walks are a little bit up this year, and the park is shaky. And the Lions have a bunch of guys who have been on an absolute tear to start the season. Jose Perella is looking like the best of the new foreign hitters. He's got an OPS over 1,000 with 8 homers. Jungkook Lee also an OPS over 1,000, and Min-Ho Kang, the catcher, also an OPS over 1,000. So it's those 3 guys having incredible starts this season is really a big part of what has the Lions so surprisingly high in the standings. And all of them have good track records. I don't think they're going to end up quite this good, but it's not out of nowhere. So it's possible that these guys are going to lead a surprising season for the Lions.
Yeah, it has been an impressive group. They are on a 3-game winning streak right now. Over that stretch, they have scored at 20 runs. So this Lions team might not be last year's Lions team, as we are seeing some positive changes for them. They send Ben Lively to the mound. Ugly ERA when you see here just on our daily lineups page here on rotowire.com/KBO. But he's kind of the opposite of Drew Rosinski. Started the year off very poorly, but had an excellent start in his last time out. You can see here, striking out 10 just 2 hits over 6 2/3 innings pitched. You maybe give Lively the edge here because of the recent performance?
Yeah, he's a lot less consistent, but it's really his last 2 starts have been great. 3 earned runs in his last 2 after 11 in his first 2. He struck out 16 and walked just 3 over his last 2 outings. So he's pitching as well as anybody in the league. I don't know if we should fully forget that he gave up 6 and 5 runs in his first 2 outings, and his ERA was mediocre last year. But he's striking out more than a quarter of batters he faced this season, which is quite high for the KBO. So I think he's got every chance to keep this one close.
Indeed, the Dinos do have a powerful offense, though. They are second best in runs per game at just at 5-5, but they were shut out yesterday 9-0 in the opener here. Where are we going to go with the pick here? Dinos, Lions, with the Dinos pretty heavy favorites.
Yeah, I think I feel more confident on the under. I think both of these pitchers are quite good. It's 2 lineups that are playing well in a hitter-friendly park, but I think the pitchers are good enough to keep the score down. And I am going to go Dinos based on the history. I think they've got a better lineup for longer. But given the actual odds here, I'm not sure I like the odds for the Dinos. So I do think I would favor the Dinos, but it's much more of a 55-45 thing than like the 70-30 that the odds here are suggesting. I think if I were to play these odds, the Lions, you're getting a lot better of a deal there for a game that I think is pretty close to a coin flip.
Indeed, 2 pitchers here going at it, Drew Rosinski and Ben Lively. Moving forward, we got the Doosan Hyungwoo game here, featuring the pitcher with the lowest ERA on the slate, and it is Walker Locket against the Kiwoom Heroes, who are technically the worst team in the KBO right now. Before we get to the Heroes, starting with Locket, 1 earned run in 4 straight games started at just 4 in the year, 5 2/3 innings pitched or more in each, and 7 strikeouts versus Lotte in his last start. Are we thinking Walker Locket is somehow maybe the new Raul Alcantara, maybe even better for this Bears team?
Yeah, he's an interesting one. He's a former teammate of Chris Flexen, who had a breakout season with the Bears and was looking like a competent major league pitcher with the Mariners so far this season. Locket didn't have much for an MLB track record, though it was better than Flexen's, and we saw what Flexen did. Locket has been elite at keeping runs off the board, though I think he doesn't quite own all of his 1.48 ERA, as you might expect. 17.2% strikeout rate, 9.1% walk rate. Both of those are fine, but nothing too spectacular. So I think it's a little bit too early to anoint him, as one of the best new foreign pitchers, but he's certainly done nothing wrong so far. And against the Heroes lineup that is not looking great this season, I think he's a strong option for daily fantasy purposes.
Yes, that Heroes team has been a mess now that he'll be facing tonight. Just a 3-7 record in their last 10. They are on a 2-game winning streak, though, and they're sending Hun-Hee Han to the mound. He had his first dub of the season in his last start, so that's good. But he has had an ERA close to 5 this year and last, so I'm not sure if we really believe in him, especially against that Bears offense.
Yeah, he's not bad, though. I think he's definitely worse than Walker Locket, but he was the guy last year who I believe had 17 earned runs in like 2 innings over 2 consecutive starts or something like that, which really inflated his ERA. This year, just 2 starts. He missed the start of the season with a finger issue. 4.76 ERA is not great, but he's striking out over 18% of batters, walking just 6.3%. So both of those are actually – that was last year, was the 18% strikeout rate and 6% walk rate, which were both pretty good. This year, just 5 strikeouts. So his whiffs are gone so far this season. I think he's a solid mid-rotation starter. I think he'd give the Heroes a chance in enough games, but I don't think he's in the same tier as Walker Locket, and I think he's probably going to get less run support because that Heroes offense has not really been good up and down the lineup this year.
Indeed, the Heroes have not been what we saw last year from them. I do want to welcome in some of our regulars coming in. Barry, DX, welcome in, guys. Talking about this offense now, Kiwoom won last night 5-4. They do have the second worst pitching in terms of runs per game and the third worst runs per game. So I don't really see a way that we would target Heroes batters, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, Jungkook Lee's only been decent. I think his OPS is in the mid 700s when he's supposed to be a guy easily over 900. Is supposed to be, continuing his breakout and turning into one of the very top players in the league, which he still could. It's just a bit of a slow start. Byung-ho Park wasn't very good and now is injured. And they've continued their streak of signing foreign hitters who aren't really doing anything. David Freitas, OPS under 700 so far. Still early, but he was a catcher stateside and not particularly an offensive-minded catcher. I think he can take a walk, but doesn't have a great bat. And I think he's only caught one game, so I'm not really sure why you get a catcher and make him be a DH. I think you could still expect more than what he's done so far, but it's probably not a big surprise that he's not, immediately becoming one of the top tier foreign hitters. So just not enough really up and down that lineup. And the bullpen also was one of their strengths last year, with Woo Jin-an and Sungwoo Cho being one of the most dominant back-end pairs. This year, Woo Jin-an moved into the rotation and was pretty bad. Sungwoo Cho missed the start of the season, and once he's come back, he hasn't been very good. So they lost another strength there. So pretty much just everything that can go wrong is going wrong outside of Erik Jokic. So when he's not playing, they don't look like a very good team. It's no real surprise to see their record what it is, given how everybody's playing.
Indeed, definitely a tough task tonight facing Walker Locket and the Doosan Bears. The Bears have scored 31 runs over their last 5. Kiwoom at 26 over their last 5. Let's go now to the pick for the Bears Heroes game. Total set at 8.5, with the Bears being the favorites, of course. I'd have to imagine you'd go Bears here. Am I correct?
Yep, definitely going Bears. Walker Lockett's done nothing wrong, and the Heroes offense hasn't done enough right. That over-under is pretty tough. I don't see the Heroes scoring all that many, and I don't think Hyun Hee-han is that bad, but I think it's a low enough over-under that I'm going to slightly side with the over here. A lot of talented bats on the Bears, so even if Hyun Hee-han is a fine mid-rotation starter, I think they can still score 6 or so without too much trouble.
All right, we're going with the Doosan Bears and the over 8.5. Here, Barry here acknowledging, yes, Kiwoom finding foreign bats. Swing and a miss so far this season, but we'll see if they can turn things around. Probably not, though, tonight against Walker Locket. Moving on to the fourth game here, we got the KT Wiz and the SSG Landers. Still not used to that name. I prefer the Wyverns, but hey, it is what it is. These two teams, though, are tied for a third, technically. KT is the hottest team in terms of their last 10, 7 wins in their last 10 games, and they're sending William Cuevas to the bump. You see an ugly ERA there, and not great strikeout to walk numbers, but, maybe give him a little slack because he was on the road against NC and Doosan in those 2 starts. So can't quite write off Cuevas just yet.
Yeah, what I'm worried about with him, though, is he missed his first turn or 2 in the rotation with back issues. So I'm wondering if that's lingering at all and explains part of why he's struggling to start the year. He also wasn't one of the top tier foreign starters last season. He was good, but he was nothing too special and struggling to start this year. And the Landers do have a better lineup, although they're now without Ju-won Choi for about a month. He just got injured. Was it a hamstring, I think, for him? And but they do still have Shin-Soo Choo, who should be one of the best hitters in the league, even nearing age 40. I mean, he's got like 1,671 major league hits, I think is the number, in a league where if you have 10, you're probably one of the better hitters in the league. I even look at a guy like Jamie Romack, his teammate, has had a long and successful KBO career after doing basically nothing at the MLB level. So Choo's MLB track record dwarfs basically everybody else in the league, and I think we can expect him to be right up there with the best bats in the league, even at his age. Hasn't had an outstanding start, but he's starting to pick things up after a slow first couple games, and he looks more or less like what he's supposed to be.
Hey, Jamie Romack had a not even memorable, I can't even say it, stint on the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks. Yes, but now he is a member of the Landers and doing all right, nothing crazy this year. But I really think the biggest headline here is this Wiz offense. 20 runs over their last 2 games, 38 over their last 5. Are we maybe saying Mel Rojas Jr. who? Are they really filling in? Because Becco Gong, I'm seeing a 422 average over his 11-game hit streak. Is this Wiz offense doing all right without Mel Rojas?
I mean, Baek Gung can lead any lineup in the league. He's right up there among the top in OPS, and that's without nearly as many homers as he might wind up hitting. It's just a phenomenal contact hitter who has good power, too. Unfortunately, they're also missing a big bat for probably 2 months in Jae-Gyun Hwang. A grounder took a terrible hop directly up into his nose the other day, and needs surgery and is going to miss an extended period. So Kong lost probably his top deputy there. Although Zoilo Almonte is getting things together after a pretty slow start. He's no Mel Rojas Jr., even though he is a switch hitting outfielder. But he's becoming, he's hitting over 300, not a ton of power yet, but he looks at least like a mid-tier foreign hitter after looking like one of the worst ones for the first few games this season. So it's a deep enough lineup that I'm not surprised to see the Wiz still up near the top of the standings.
Indeed, and the pitcher they're facing tonight is really more of a reliever in O. Has some pretty solid strikeout numbers in a small sample size, being a reliever in most of those outings, but 14 strikeouts to just 5 walks. Any concern here that O could quiet that Wiz offense?
Yeah, there might be something here, like Yuli Lee, who we talked about earlier with the Tigers. O is a regional round draft pick, which, again, for those who weren't there at the start, that there's that additional round before round 1 of the draft where teams select players from their local area. O was, I guess, the best guy that year it's Incheon, I believe, for the Landers. And so that means he was taken, before the first round. So that means they have a lot of faith in him. He's already in his second year at age 20, and he's playing. Decent numbers, but again, mostly as a reliever. His one start wasn't anything special, 5 runs in 4.2 innings. So I think we might look back on him in a couple years or maybe even middle of this year as a pretty solid mid-rotation starter or better, but not nearly enough track record to decide that at this point. And against a lineup as good as the Wiz, I wouldn't count on him having a strong game here.
Not looking good for the youngster here in O. Let's go now to our pick. Where are we going with the KT Wiz SSG Landers game? Total here set at a lofty 11 runs.
Yeah, that's a high total, especially with those teams each losing a key player. But with O being so inexperienced and with Cuevas not looking great yet, I think I'm still going to go over. I think that they correctly made it a challenging one, though. But I would expect to see a lot of runs. And I think more of those runs are going to be scored by the Wiz. I think they have a better lineup. The Landers, despite being up there in the standings, they're actually second worst in run differential, which I believe is exactly where they finished last year. So there might be a bit of smoke and mirrors getting them up this high, especially now that they're going to be without Ju-Won Choi for a month or so. So I think the Wiz are still a significantly better team than the Landers, even though those records are the same.
All right, that is the 4th game. Moving now into the 5th game, the best game, if you will, because it is Dan Straley taking on the LG Twins, the number 1 team in the standings, the LG Twins. It is an aces game here. Casey Kelly is in this matchup as well. But you probably wouldn't guess this, but the LG Twins are actually the lowest scoring team in the KBO. Just a tick over 4 runs per game, yet they are in first place with a positive average run margin. So I'm not really sure what we make of them here against Straley, just betting on a low-scoring game here, because Straley's been pretty solid to start this year.
Yeah, it's another great pitching matchup like that Dinos Lions one, although this one's in the most pitcher-friendly park. So I think there shouldn't be much question as to how scoring this one's going to be. Both pitchers are excellent, should be among the league's best when everything's going right. They were both among the league's best last year. There's at least minor questions with each. For Kelly, he had 4 walks against 4 strikeouts in both of his last 2 starts. He didn't give up a ton of runs, but that's a suggestion that he's maybe not pitching quite his best. But I think that's less of a question mark than for Straley, who was really knocked around and left in, I think, the 3rd inning in his last start due to a blister. The fact that he's starting tells me that the Giants think he's going to be fine. So maybe we just fully buy in and decide he's fine, but blisters can be really tricky for pitchers. Even if guys come back, they're not always fully back, and the blister can, resurface in the 2nd inning, and all of a sudden we're talking about long relievers throwing, 7-8 innings. So I think a definite worry here. It's entirely possible he's the same Dan Straley he ever is, but I'm actually going to stay away from him for daily fantasy purposes just because that downside there is pretty high. I think still fine as a tournament option, but for cash games, I think the downside risk of him having to leave in the second inning because the blister comes back is something I'm looking to avoid.
Yes, definitely a wild card there. Casey Kelly, just one thing to note about him, 5 earned runs in 22 innings pitched. Was great to start the year, but he does have that 8-to-8 strikeout to walk ratio. Is he someone that maybe would step up in that role if you're not willing to go up for a Walker Locket type?
Yeah, Kelly is actually my top recommendation on this cheat sheet. I think he's the third most expensive after Straley and Rajinski. I think Locket is right behind him, I believe, on this slate. And Kelly, when he's on, he's basically as good as anybody. Strikeout rate over 18% last year, along with a 5.5% walk rate. Walks are a little bit up this season, mostly based on those last 2 starts, but not quite enough to be all that worried. So I also think, given how righty-heavy the Giants lineup is, I think that gives even more of an edge to Kelly.
All right. Yesterday in the series opener, Roberto Ramos went deep for the 3rd time on the year, 4-0 victory for the LG Twins. Lotte scoring at the 3rd best rate right now. Where are we going with the pick here?
I am going to go Twins, mostly because, in the 5-10% of the world, 5 to 10% of all possible worlds where Dan Straley does keep having blister issues, I think that's enough. I think if that doesn't happen, I think it's very close to a 50-50, but given that that's possible, I'm going to go Twins. But I think, still going to go under. It's a real low over-under, but you got 2 of probably the top 5 starters in the league. So I think there'd be no surprise at all if this is a 3-1 kind of game.
Indeed, going with the under there, and that is all 5 games on the KBO slate here. The Dinos-Lions matchup here is not lighting up, but we do have the Dinos as the pick and that under. Dinos. Here we go. All right. Top 3 picks, Erik, wrapping up the show here from the entire slate. Team total or team, where are we going to go?
Yeah, I think let's start with that Wiz. I think we're going to go Wiz over Landers, unless I'm missing something obvious that I'm not thinking of. There's no really super obvious ones, I think, on this slate. I think with Wonsuck, just too inexperienced, decent numbers, but mostly because he was pitching in relief. I think that the Wiz have a better lineup. Their run differential is way better than the Landers, even though their records are the same. So I think that's enough of a mismatch that I'll go there. I guess I'll go Bears over Heroes. Maybe that one's even bigger mismatch, but that's pretty close. Just nothing's going right for the Heroes this year. All of their hitters are underperforming pretty much. Hyun Hee-han is fine, but probably mid-rotation ceiling. Walker Locket has given up exactly 1 earned run in all 4 starts. And for number 3, I think I'm going to go Tigers. It's a bit of a risk taking a guy in just his 4th ever KBO start in Yuli Lee, but hasn't done anything wrong so far, and he's facing the Eagles, who are actually 6th, I believe, in scoring. They're just a normal bad team this year, not an awful team so far, but they didn't really make big changes, so I don't really think that they're going to stick 6th in scoring. C1 Rowe somehow is one of the best hitters in the entire league after having an OPS under 700 last year. So when things like that are what's getting you just to the 6th best offense, I think there's reason to believe that's not going to stick. So I'll go Tigers number 3 there.
Tigers as the number 3 pick. That's what we got for the top 3, the KT Wiz, the Doosan Bears, and the Kia Tigers for the top 3. I potentially like that over in the KT SSG game. It is quite high, very high, 11 runs. But potentially, if we can see something explode as an option here, Barry likes the Dinos as that number 3 pick here. Are we a fan of them?
I think I said for that one, I think it's close to 55-45 in the Dinos' favor. I don't think it's a clear favorite because Lions bats, just too many of them are on fire right now. Ben Lively's coming off a pair of really good starts. So I think that one's pretty close given what the odds are on this one. Although I think straight up I would take the Dinos, but just only slightly.
All right, and that's all. That's our show. That's KBO Chats Live. Thank you guys for tuning in. Be sure to follow at RotoWire KBO on Twitter and check out rotowire.com/free KBO for a subscription. Check out the daily lineups here. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everybody.